Yeah. Okay. All right, I'd like to bring this regular meeting of the Norwich City School District Board of Education to order. We'll begin by having the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States. Yeah. Little delay there. All right. Good evening, everyone. We'll start with the minutes. It's recommended that the Board of Education adopt minutes from the August 17th, 2022 regular meeting. Do I have a motion? Motion. Moved by Brian Burton. Second. Also by Birch. Any discussion, additions, or corrections? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So carried. All right, Superintendent's report. Mr. Ryan, you have the floor.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Officially, been since August 17th that we've gathered together. So nice to see everybody. We have a riveting presentation to start off tonight. Mr. Dwayne Schoen from Insero and Company, providing a financial report to the Board of Education. Dwayne, you have the floor.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for a few minutes this evening. So I'm here to present to you draft results of the audit. I should note these are in draft, but we're good with these numbers. They're not going to change. We've just got some loose ends that we need to tie up. I want to start by thanking Brian, Wendy, Scott, everybody at the district for all of their help in getting us through the audit in a nice, smooth, efficient process. We're going to be done with these and get them filed by the October 15th SCD deadline. So that's good news. We'll be on track. I do want to talk a little bit just from the executive summary, get some of the highlights of the numbers for you. Certainly, if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them. We're planning to issue unmodified opinions, clean opinions on the financial statements. That's the kind of opinion that you want to have. Means that we believe the financial statements are fairly stated in accordance with accounting principles and that they don't require any modifications. Okay. There are some additional documents, additional things that are part of that presentation. In addition to our opinion on the financial statements themselves, there's also supplementary information that's included in that board packet. Some of that information is required by accounting standards. Some of that information is required by state education department, and some of it is required by the federal government for what's commonly called the single audit. It's officially called the Uniform Guidance Audit. But all of that supplemental information is included in the financial report, and it's all subject to our opinion. In addition to those opinions, we're required under government auditing standards to issue a report on internal control and compliance with laws and regulations. That report identifies no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies in the control system, and no non-compliance with laws and regulations. And then in addition to that, we also have to issue another report on internal control and compliance because the district spends more than $750,000 a year in federal money. In the 21-22 year, the district spent about $5.2 million in federal assistance. Most of it passed through state ed. And because of that spending, we have to issue another report on internal control and compliance. That report also identified no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies in the control system, and no non-compliance with laws and regulations. So all good news, all clean reports.
Dwayne, if you want to move closer to the TV, you can use that as your guide.
Sure.
Board of
Yeah.
Education, if you don't have a copy in front of them.
Okay. Yes.
And I'm sorry, you'll just have to direct me.
Nope,
Does
you're
anybody
fine.
want a printed copy?
You're fine.
Oh, perfect, never mind.
Okay.
Got it.
And then the only other things that are in here, there are reports for the extra classroom activity funds. A report on the balances for each of those clubs. And there is a comment letter with a few fairly minor issues with respect to some of the controls for those extra classroom funds. So what you see in front of you is a 5-year financial statement analysis that we put together. This is mostly general fund information, but it gives you a sense for where the district is now and where it's been over the last few years. You can see that total assets in the general fund increased about $4 million from the end of last fiscal year to the end of this fiscal year. About $1.8 million more cash and investments. And about $2 million more due from other funds, just a matter of timing of when monies come from one fund to another. About a $500,000 increase in total liabilities in the general fund due to retirement systems increased about $250,000, mostly because of percentage increases for the TRS and ERS systems. And then due to other funds, again, just timing of when monies go back and forth between the funds. So assets increased by $4 million, liabilities increased by $500,000. That means fund balance in total increased by about $3.5 million. You can see a significant increase in the restricted fund balance, the reserves. The district set up a couple new reserves, a liability reserve, tax certiorari reserve, and then funded to a good extent capital reserves. So you can see if you look back, 2-3 years ago, the restricted funds were very small, 2 million, 2 million, 2 million. And now over the last couple of years, the district has done, I think, a really good job of funding a lot of those reserve accounts. Unassigned fund balance, the unrestricted fund balance is 1.8 million, which is right at the 4% limit. So the district is within the New York State Education Department limit. You can see if you look back, just 2-3 years ago, the district had a negative unrestricted unassigned fund balance. So now you've gotten that where it needs to be. The bottom half of this page shows changes in revenues and expenditures, again, for the last 5 years. Roughly a $1 million increase in total revenues this year compared to last. Property taxes actually went down a little bit. State sources went up about $1.5 million. And federal and Medicaid monies went down about $400,000. And then below that, the expenditures. In total, expenditures increased about $5 million from last year to this. The instructional category went up about $2.7 million, a significant increase there. About $500,000, a little more than $500,000 more in debt service. And then interfund transfers, monies sent over to capital fund to other funds. But we're about $1.4 million in the current year. Down at the bottom, just some information about some of the other funds. The district had about $3.1 million in capital outlay in the current year, quite a bit more than in the last couple of years prior. The special aid fund has significantly more revenues and expenditures. This year, a lot of the COVID money comes into the special aid fund first, and then gets transferred over to the general fund to be used. So kind of a year or two that special aid fund is going to be a lot higher than normal, and then it'll kind of normalize. And then school lunch fund had an increase in fund balance of about $150,000. You can see both revenues and expenditures increased quite a bit in the current year. Of course, more people here, more students here, so some more activity in that school lunch fund. The next page of the executive summary shows a little bit more information about the reserve funds. You can see here at the top, just the different reserve funds that the district has, and that same, 5-year trend information. Below that is just a very short chart, very short schedule that shows, again, that you were within the 4% limit. If you'd scroll down just a little bit more. Keep going down, yeah, right there. So next year's budget, almost $46 million. So 4% of that is $1,839,000, which is exactly where the unassigned fund balance is. So again, you're right at that limit. And then down below here is a chart showing reserve activity for the year. So the district began the year with about $7.6 million in reserves in various different types of reserves, added a total of $4.6 million in the reserves, appropriated about $270,000 in the reserves, and ended the year with almost $12 million reserved. So the next page is a high-level budgetary comparison schedule. This just shows the final budget versus the actual activity. The district brought in about $880,000 more than budgeted for revenues. And then down below that, spent about $3.3 million less than the final budget. You can see the different areas where the district spent below the budget. And then the next page of the executive summary, this is an analysis of net position. So this is based on the government-wide presentation. The district's financial statements are prepared in 2 different formats. There is the fund basis presentation that shows all the funds separately. There is also a government-wide presentation that takes all the funds together, includes capital assets, includes all the long-term debt, the district's share of the state pension system obligations, and an actuarial calculation of the district's retiree health insurance obligations. So this net position analysis is done on that government-wide format. The total net position of the district was almost $71 million at the end of the year. About 50 million of that was invested in capital assets, so the net basis of the district's buildings, equipment, net of debt, net of accumulated depreciation. Restricted net position, mostly the reserve accounts as well as some other monies, $13.2 million, and then unrestricted net position of about $7.6 million at the end of the year. That's it for the executive summary, and with that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions. I know I went really fast.
So the audit committee met the other day and got a more in-depth presentation than this.
Mhm.
And I just want to add that there was no significant deficiencies throughout the entire audit process. And we also hear the what's the one thing that's carried year after year, extracurricular, which has been a no on every audit since I've been on the school board. It's no longer an issue. All good news.
Yep. Yes.
Congratulations to Brian.
Yeah.
The entire administrative team. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yep.
Appreciate it.
Definitely a lot of good improvements in the controls as well as in the financial position over the last couple of years. So good news.
Any other questions, comments? Anybody want to carry Brian on the shoulders right now? Big props to everybody in the business office. We have, I think, finally the staff where we need to be. A lot of transition the past years. I think we're in a good spot. So a lot of work that goes in the background. Like you said, Wendy, pivotal for this. Odessa, Stacy, sure. A lot of hard work goes into making sure we get reports like this. Not just one person. Great. You've come a long way. I'll second that.
First, we were on the board. Where we had no.
going all the way down to the futures that are something invoices and reimbursements, that was an issue. It's no longer an issue, and everybody's doing it the right way. So, it's top to bottom, everybody's contributed to a very positive audit. So,
Right.
Appreciate everybody taking part in making sure that it happens correctly. Thank you.
Dwayne and his team, and then, of course, throughout the year, we can call them at any time and clarify something or get an opinion from them. So before it makes its way to the report, we're addressing it up front. They're also very responsive to make sure this report has enough like this.
Great.
Dwayne, huge thanks to you.
Okay.
Send a huge thanks to Ben as well.
We'll do that. Okay.
Make it more purple.
Yes, I did.
Thank you very much.
I made sure. All right, great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. What's that? So we have another item for you, the teaching and learning update.
Yep, so tonight you'll be hearing both from our Director of Teaching and Learning Personnel, Jess Poyer, on sort of the state of the state with respect to staffing and programming updates. And then Brian's going to transition into a little bit about transportation, a little bit about food service, impact of long-term planning around student enrollment, and of course, the financial perspective on that. So you'll see a pretty comprehensive presentation tonight. It is a singular presentation that you'll see, but again, we just broke it up into different sections for purposes of the agenda. So if you have any questions at any time, I would ask you, just more of a conversation, not us just, presenting to you.
Yeah.
All right.
Also, so we're gonna start with a video. So Chris,
Yeah.
why don't
I
you
need
turn
to
up the
turn the
volume?
TV up again.
And I think you might have to turn the volume down on the computer speakers. I worry that we're gonna have also. So we're gonna start with a video. So Chris,
Yeah.
why don't you turn up the volume?
up again.
And you,
And I think you might have to turn the volume down. Speakers.
is it
I
muted?
worry that we're gonna have also side. So we're gonna start with video. So Chris,
Yeah.
why don't you turn up the volume? And Yeah. Great. All right, so then, within the PLC, there's 3 big focal points. Did anyone catch those from the video? Great. Great. So, anyone catch those 3 pieces? All right, so a focus on collaboration. Yeah. Roz. Student learning. And ultimately, we're looking for results, right? So when we think about the work that we're doing, it's really focused on those 3 main pieces. All right, try to click forward here. Always happens. All right, so starting with mission and vision, the decisions that we're working around, all children, right? And then what I know to be true is that tonight you'll hear, a progression of design experiences is really what our work entails. When we think about our vision, again, that idea of continuous improvement and collaboration. And collective efficacy, really it's this idea of, and the definition is there, this idea that we come to work every day believing that we have the skills and the ability to together really make a huge impact on all students. Okay, so decision-making, all of those pieces really come with that at the heart of what we do. I first have to mention John Hattie, an amazing researcher. Okay, so moving into just centering you back, we talked a little bit about strategic planning, I know, with the principles, and really coming up with 3 main goals. So empowering student growth through improved attendance habits, assuring all students increased academic, social, emotional, and physical performances through direct intentional action, and certainly committing to the work of that professional learning committee. And might I add, super proud of our teachers this summer, just in terms of the work that they did. We spent $130,000 in professional learning. So teachers coming together in teams, working together. That's a huge investment because we believe that that's going to make the biggest impact on student learning. So I just wanted to point you to a little bit of data so far. And again, I'm breaking all the slide deck rules here with more than a few lines on there. But you can see in terms of attendance, so students missing 2 or more days so far in the 22-23 school year, and these are unexcused absences. Okay, so just to kind of clarify that, these are students where, looking at our criteria of excused and unexcused, these are the numbers of students who are missing those days so far. I can tell you that as a team, we are really working hard to get clear on what those practices are in terms of reporting, as well as what is our response to that. So I would say across every single building, there are clear guidelines in terms of who's doing what when kids aren't coming to school, because we know that we can't impact a student if they're not in the gym, right, or on the rug or whatever. So, I can't be more proud of our staff right now in terms of all hands on deck. We've had home visits already, and we're talking about our school safety officers teaming up with our at-risk coordinators, going out and really saying, we want you here at school. What are the barriers we can remove in order for that to happen? And the other piece is that we're tracking this data all the time. So really just, first of all, having a clear awareness of what the numbers are is a great first step. So.
Is your definition of unexcused no call, no show, and no upon return to the school?
Right.
Everything else counts.
Yeah. Which, it's an interesting sort of educational piece for families too, to understand that it's a fine line coming out of COVID and all of those things, right? Folks are, more apt to stay home if they're not feeling well, that kind of thing. Just really trying to educate families around the importance of being here truly together. So,
Jess, do the high school numbers include the care program students?
So my kids have been out a lot taking COVID. And I get.
So that's
all
excused.
Text, but so I got a text today, so there's a feedback and it has a Google Doc that you can add. So I think there's a lot, the schools are trying really hard to quite an easy way
Yeah.
for parents
With
to,
the automated call.
well, to like send a note
Yeah.
in or this or that, and at the high school. DMAC or sometimes she's not there, so you don't know if the message is coming in. So the Google Doc I got in some text message today,
Yeah,
I couldn't open.
Okay.
I wanted to, but you know, Mr. King. That was just,
Yeah.
but I think using all avenues, they're my concerns.
Great.
Appreciate that feedback.
Do we do a comparison of where that stood versus last year, same time, right?
we are working on that. We have not done that yet, and the data is just again.
Okay.
We will.
So Roz's Google Doc, because I got one this morning too. Mine comes up, you need permission. You don't
Yeah,
have
that's
permission
what
to
I-
do. So you,
permission.
it does link, it just says you need permission.
That's what I'm
Oh,
thinking.
open up the sharing.
Perfect. Yeah.
All good feedback.
Yeah, that's just for high school students, but,
So that's the other thing that we're really trying to do is streamline the same practices across the district. So when your child moves from Harry Brown to, Norwich Middle School, you're really well versed in, hey, this is how I report. Yeah, exactly. All right, so the other big piece that, we really just want to talk about is, again, lots of change. And these numbers really reflect from January to now. So we hired 37 instructional and administrative folks. So, and you can see how those are broken down across the district. And then the new positions that were created, based on the budget process through the last year, include those departments that you see on the screen there. And, there's some positions that we're continuing to advertise for. Super fortunate that we have some dedicated folks in the community who are retirees coming back on board. So we have a retiree coming in to Perry Brown to help out with counseling, which is a huge help, as well as 2 folks who are working in our elementary buildings and 2 positions. And, again, continuing to advertise, work with local colleges and, thinking about student teaching opportunities and all of those pieces. So, our goal is to continue to be fully staffed. And Brian, I'm not sure if you wanted to add a little bit here.
Yeah, so in terms of staffing, years ago, when you bring on new staff, we get that breakage point from the old staff, retiring out, and leaving the new staff, starting at a lower rate. So we actually pulled the numbers and looked at where we're at now. Surprisingly, just broke even. So why is that important? I'm going to talk about it a little bit later. As we bring on people, we're finding more coming with experience. We're not getting as many of those new hires that start out at that entry level wage. It also drives TRS contribution, drives all the other benefits, things like all that now. So we're starting to see upward pressure, so to speak, on the budget. I think in terms of the numbers, we had 7 that came in at that entry level rate. We had 15 that came in under budget, and then there were 12 that were over. And that net of the overage and the underage just broke even. It was just a little bit over. Which I think just speaks to the hiring environment right now. They know it is. The market's tight, so they know that they're comparing offers with districts. District can do this, this one can do this. That's the way market is right now.
And also, when you look at the folks we hired, we've had some, I can think of it, our elementary building, we had a person who's a social worker for a long time and had tried to seek an elementary position in 2008 and said, now's the time. So they're coming out with more experience. And so we just have to ensure that we're compensating them for such. So it's different time.
Not necessarily a bad thing.
Definitely. So then just the other piece there that, obviously, totally on our radar is around retention. Just some of the different ways in which we're supporting is having that everyday new professional orientation. We're pairing our mentees with mentors and giving them that release time during the year, as well as continuing with the new professional academy 4 times this year after school, compensating folks for that, and just really trying to be really responsive and supportive with curricular materials, and those kinds of things. And so, yes, recruitment is a thing, and so is retention.
Well, the thing that strikes me too is like, like in this time period, this is a really stressful time period for this profession in particular, but hopefully long term, what the shortage does is that helps breed excellence and then increase overall nationwide how teachers get paid, because it's just such a valuable, thankless job that hopefully will help boost the profession.
Positive, right?
Right, yeah, yeah,
Ultimately, impacting kids, right?
yeah.
All right, so just to kind of center you on this slide, so this is our enrollment. So you can see Stanford Gibson across the top, and then we move to Perry Brown at the second line, middle school, and then high school. So you can see the current enrollment in each building. I will say, Pre-K has 2 more additions going half day at the Y. It's certainly a great collaboration. We'll start next week. So we continue to advertise for families seeking those 4-year-olds. Well, still 3-year-olds, right, Jen, sometimes at this time of the year to come in, and so that we can, really get them into the school and get them acclimated. So we continue to advertise. The state pulls the counts for UPK all through the year. So really behooves us to continue to do that.
I think we had a conversation last year where the pre-K was capped at a much lower number than I'm seeing out there.
Yeah.
So obviously we made some adjustments, we got enough staff.
Yeah.
And that's good news.
So I'm checking my math. I added up 1,700.
Oh,
Next
well,
slide.
well, Roz, I mean, you can wait for it.
Oh,
There you
okay.
go.
Well, I just remember at the
I'm just picking on you.
first, or second year, there was like a screen chart that showed our enrollment.
Yeah. Yep. And so that, so again, just centering you on this slide. So top enrollment there is our September 2022 right now. And then the average enrollment for each grade level, total enrollment, and then with other placements.
Mostly students in private business. So we focus on that K-12 because that's a metric that the state uses. So they usually will take off UPK. So when we compare to other districts, we compare year over year, we're really looking at that K-12 number. The chart below, rather than what that's what you're referring to, but you're going to see this frequently, especially as we get into budget season, because these are all key metrics we're going to use to dictate the decisions we're going to make, especially in terms of staffing, in terms of facilities as well. So what you can see, it's hard for me to see back here, but on the bottom, you have 2022-23, where we stand student to staff broken out in total by NEO, which is teaching or instructional staff, NASA, the support staff, and then again, total students to total staff. What it's comparing the 2 columns, is where we are now versus what the 10-year average has been. So we're always going to continue to go back to that when making staffing decisions. Where do we fit? Are we getting too high? Are we getting too low? So for example, bring your attention to the staffing, student to staff line for support staff, so that's the line. We're high, right? So we have more students to our NASA staff than we have historically. Again, something I'm going to get into in my part is we really need to start getting that staffing up. And not necessarily that we need a student ratio for that group, but in terms of facility, we look at the facility size, we're under there as well. So I think the point of this is we have different metrics we're going to use to help dictate budget process. That was.
I would, this is not a very fiscally responsible necessarily comment, but I would argue in a time where retention is challenging, I would look to flip that and spend a little more and have a few extra, knowing that you're going to need to be flexible because it's more difficult than ever to retain. So I would actually look at it as positive if we had whatever in the selected areas, right? I know not all areas, I wouldn't make that comment, but I would think it would be smart to be a little more risk averse and have an extra teacher or 2 or 3, whatever the number is. And flip that ratio and be okay with that. Times we're in right now, I think it's prudent to be a little bit more conservative, in my opinion. So I think we go in the budget and, in my opinion, we lean more in that way now more than ever.
When it says NASA up there, it's pretty familiar with your support staff. Yeah, your support staff, grades, your assistants, cafeteria workers, custodians, Nice. Education.
How does the ratio on the other school districts?
Of similar demographics. Yeah. We haven't done that comparison. We are right on the verge right now on integration into a new system called Frontline. We have the ability to literally pull any district that is of like size and do that quick analysis. So we're gonna be having that very shortly.
There's that forecast 5 we talked about. Once again, now it's spawned out that front line, so you can literally build peer groups like Wednesday or week or wherever you want and see all sorts of metrics that are there. Because the numbers standing alone, you know, pretty. Over.
Yeah.
It's 13 really a high number. Other schools are at 24.
Yeah.
You know, so
You want context?
contrast, right?
I agree.
Good. All right, so again, we started, in the beginning, talking about focus on learning, collaboration, and results. So in order to do that, we really need to ensure that we have a baseline idea of where our students are at academically as well as socially. So you can see that right now in September, we're administering our academic screener. So across K5, it's ready. I'm sitting with a kindergarten teacher yesterday, and she's just so pleased to see that I have these results already, which literally group my kids into different groupings based on, their success rate in different areas like phonemic awareness and fluency and things like that. And so a lot of really good real-time data that they can use the next day to start instructing. Similarly, NWEA, Lori Race is really heading that up at 612 and has done a really nice job of working with teachers, listening to teachers, administering that. So again, having that really interesting data to be able to sit down with the student and say, hey, last year, looking at your growth, you're here, let's set a goal, for you going forward, which is very different than any high school student has ever heard. Let's be honest, right? Like we really have that real time information. So through our PLT time in the morning, they're able to, as colleagues, work together to say, how are we going to utilize this information to be able to make instructional decisions in the classroom? Similarly, the social emotional side. So the way that the BIMAS 2 works is that the designers are really intentional to say you need to wait about 6 weeks until kids settle and relationships are developed. So our teachers will fill that out, pre-K 5 for kids coming up in the next couple of weeks. And then our students 612 will take that screener. And so we'll have a really good idea of where kids are at, what our needs are across those areas. And then, responding to that, UPK 12, we have Purposeful People, which is a social emotional learning program, character education program at K5, and then 612 is Character Strong. Middle school has the advisory period now, so they're able to include that into, hey, I'm your advisory teacher. We're going to work through. Let's have some good conversation around how you do it. Let's talk about self-management. Let's talk about relationships. Let's have some of those conversations. So lots of good information in the screener, which we'll be able to utilize right away, like I said, and then see that growth by January and we administer it again, and then again in May. So again, that's the one measure that we're really putting a lot of stock in because the data is so fresh.
Just can you just pause there for a second?
Sure.
If I'm a parent, what will I see or what will I get from that screener?
So across the district, parents, caregivers will be getting a report home. So at our elementary buildings, our staff is really going to use that during the conference time. So, and what's great about the reports is that it really, at like kindergarten yesterday, one of the aspects that they're looking at in terms of literacy is vocabulary. So you're able to say to the caregiver, when you're in the car having the conversation, here's a way that you can, expand and practice vocabulary development. Or, if you're in 9th grade and you're in algebra, here are some of the areas where that student, and Eric can help me out. Has,
Probably not the best example.
These are like with math, it'll look across all the major areas, like operations and algebraic thinking, geometry, etc. And it gives, you know, where your kid is at in terms of, you know, where they're at in terms of comparison to national average. If that makes sense. So, and then the parent would also be able to see, how has my child grown? Ultimately, that's what we're looking for.
So being that our administration of this assessment is the first of the year and acts as a baseline, will it give me a comparison of where we ended last year?
Yes. So if a child participated in the screener in June, you're able to see that.
Jessica, I have a question about the BIMAS, having administered that last year as a teacher. When we do that, when we take a look at each child, we looked at the past week's behavior, social, emotional. Do you know why it was just the past week that we would focus on that particular child's social, emotional piece and not a longer period of time? Because sometimes it was difficult for me knowing that a child was having a tough week when typically they didn't, or vice versa.
Yeah.
So it was just a week's time span that you had to really focus on. Do you know why?
So that's coming right from the designers of the assessment and just saying like, that's just the most recent capture of that student. Yeah, but you know what, having that information to know that if you're administering it in October and then again in January, yes, the child may have had a tough week that week, but then you're seeing the growth. You know, the next time that the child is able to make just important conversations, right? Yeah.
Growth is the key.
Yep. And so then this data is from our June Regents examination. And so again, our teachers have this information. Actually, each teacher has how kids in their class performed on every single question in comparison to the region and the state. So again, during that professional learning time, they're able to say, okay, so we planned out what is it that we want all kids to learn. Let's see how our students performed in our class last year and see what sort of adjustments that we may want to make in our instruction based on that information. Okay, so just another data point that we're keeping in mind. This next one, you'll see is actually 2021 3-8 data. And the reason why it's 2021 is because the 2022 data regionally is still embargoed. So again, when we talk about data for different purposes, we like to put a lot of stock in our locally administered assessments. So we're talking about our screeners and we're talking about our benchmark and common formative assessments, because that information is real time. The information that we get back from pre-grade testing is really old by the time that we get that information. So to be able to use it for instructional purposes is, I would say, very difficult.
So to say that differently, right? The students in 2-8 took a test last spring, remote BLA and math. That data is still embargoed, meaning it can't be publicly shared.
So
How is that able to be used to inform decision-making in school districts? That's the question I would ask the board. The answer is not right.
what I can tell you though about our teachers and 3-8 and what they're doing right now is they've had a great amount of change over the last couple of years as we work toward this professional learning community work. So they've really gotten together in their teams and they're answering those 4 questions, which is critical when we talk about looking at growth and looking at results. And so, you know, working through new curriculum, working through different assessments. When I talk about collective efficacy, really different this year is that our students at the elementary level are engaged in a second specials experience. So during that time, it's all hands on deck in terms of intervention. So all of our teachers are, you know, going into each other's classrooms, you know, working through a response to intervention. So some teachers are trained in something called Wharton Gillingham. Some teachers are trained in something called level literacy intervention. So really being able to target what kids need and then respond to that, you know, in particular. So
Jess, is this the percentages? Is that those performing at grade level?
proficient. Yeah,
During B grade level.
Yes.
Yes.
based on a scale that somebody knows the mystery to how it's calculated.
Apparently 8th grade math was a tough test.
Yeah.
Remember those, remember though, that it's absent of the top 25 students there in algebra.
Algebra. And this was 2021, so height of
And,
So is this the spring of 2021?
So, yep.
Spring semester, so we've been back in school about a month and a half. Right. Even stated, that would be most school districts in New York State. Just doing quick math, it looks like we average anywhere from 10 to 15% below state average in most categories. Obviously, you guys don't feel that's acceptable. Why such a huge difference? It looks like in our region, we're, as far as like compared to BOCES goes, we're right in line or ahead. You know, some categories percentage or two behind. Why to the state level? Any idea, any drivers there?
It's a huge conversation. So you can't point to a single thing, right? It's so many factors. Right, one of the first things I point at is it's not reflected in your South Down, right? What I want to see is how many kids actually took the test. What I actually tell you is that what's more important than that percentage right there is how a child does from one grade level to the next and the growth that's demonstrated. And that's how it's supposed to be used at the state level. It's just not factored that way in the staff.
So the fact that we're seeing a significant improvement in the 8th grade ELA in proficiency is a good thing, because you're seeing growth throughout that from beginning to end. Is that what you're saying? That's, to you, that's more important than
What I want to do is those kids who took the 8th grade ELA, the first thing I'm looking at is how they do last year. So last year with their previous year's 2020 ELA data.
okay, so how they did.
like a child who, like how many of our students who were proficient, the next year were above proficient.
So if the 3rd grade current ELA 39%, right? So by the time those kids get to 8th grade, if they're performing at 70 or 65%, we're doing our job. Correct? Would that be?
But again, data reflects that we are not performing at that percent.
Right now.
So the work of the professional learning, we believe is the right work to say, that's focusing on learning, focusing on collaboration will get us the result.
I just want to make sure I'm focusing on the right thing
Yeah.
on this chart, because without guidance on it, I look at it and say, we're not doing anything. We're looking for growth.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so just giving you an idea regarding at the really on the other end of the spectrum, the AP courses and enrollment. So last year, these are the courses we offered through AP, and you can look at the number of students enrolled. And again, this is the work of our teaching staff who are really interested in being able to offer these rigorous courses. And so you know, we are now impacting really double that in terms of the kids who are enrolled in AP courses, as well as our teachers who are taking the time to engage in the professional learning and really ensuring that they're following the AP curriculum and all of that outside of school time. So hats off to them. It's great. And so, you know, AP stats, we would like to see that number grow next year. I know Paul is working really hard there. We have somebody who's taking it as an independent study this year, which is really awesome.
I think that's great, because we've heard from salutatory and valedictory over the last couple of years, the same message. More AP,
Yeah.
need more choices, need more availability of it, to see 100% growth in that 1 year. Very happy to see. Congratulations.
We are soon. And then the other piece are the dual credit courses. And so, you know, anyone who's got the college age students or they're upcoming, you know that every class is a cost, right? So we want to make sure that we are diversifying our offerings and ensuring, yes, APs as well as dual credit. So last year, you know, we had 9 different classes impacting 58 students. And then this year, it's really grown exponentially. And you can't read that, but there's courses. What I really love on here is there's courses, you know, ranging from solutions in wellness and fitness. So we've rigorized, not sure that's a word, I'm going to use it.
I like it.
Our PE sections all the way to, you know, general chemistry as a dual credit class. lots of different math classes, English. We have one in particular that I think speaks to our efforts to recruit and retain down the line is that we have a childhood education class through SUNY Oneonta. So that's a new partnership with them that we've also moved our Head Start to the high school. So super cute to see the 3 and 4-year-olds up there. And so the goal would be to have the practical experience for our high school students to say, hey, maybe you want to be a teacher at the end of the day. So that's a great experience for them, as well as courses like digital design. Brenna's taken that on, which has been great. So just really proud of the teaching staff to be able to take on this extra added piece. Economics and government is another one that we've really added a rigor to. So we've said all students enrolled in economics and government, that will be an available dual credit class for them. Why
This is
not?
still, say, Mr. Turnbull.
Yeah.
Traditionally teaching it, just he now has the certification, whatever it's called,
Or
to
it's
be able to
dual credit.
allow it to be dual credit.
Yes,
That's great.
because we all know senior year often can be that time of like, so we're trying to avoid that and continue to have the kids challenged. And it comes with its own set of challenges, but again, I'd say that it's, yes, growing pains are hard, but once we start to teach our kids that like, this is value added for you in high school, take advantage of the opportunity, that's really our job. So.
It's really good.
Just 446 more students that are more well prepared.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, a couple points I just point out, right? You have 2 more higher ed collaborations there with some room and only out, right, have been added, as well as, think about that in terms of from a dollar perspective, right? If those transfer into freshman year for students entering college or university, right? Every one of those courses represents $1,500 to $80,000. Right, so that's pretty significant to be able to do for our community.
Got RIT up there too for engineering.
All right, that's right. Yeah.
Yes, and there's actually 2 opportunities there now because we have construction systems or civil architecture, which you'll see on the next slide.
That's great.
Right. And so then the next piece I wanted to talk about, and again, I think our salutatory and valedictorian have talked about the engineering piece, over the last couple of years. And so the project Lead the Way is really, it's where the school districts who have high student achievement, it's the curriculum that they use. I mean, it's just very good. And so last year, really, we didn't have any viable project Lead the Way courses. And so this year, again, super proud to say, I just walked through 9 through 12. I highlighted design and drawing for production and Amazon projects on computer science. So those aren't necessarily project Lead the Way courses, but they are in that realm of a student who's kind of going to go in that pathway. Those would be great offerings for them. So introduction to engineering design, construction systems, and then another piece that I'm really proud of, one of our new science teachers, biomedical science. So that's another science credit that kids can get, super hands-on. He's again engaged in this professional learning at night, but he's loving it. He's like, the community that I'm in through Project Lead the Way is nationwide. I'm getting to see what other teachers are doing. And then, of course, when we think about that, this design progression of experience for kids, it's got to start somewhere, right? So now at our middle level, we have 3 different courses that we didn't have before for Project Lead the Way. Certainly it's an investment. We have app creators, design and modeling, as well as automation and robotics. So this is going to be a continuous shift for us as our kids come up more and more prepared. We're going to have to shift the type of offerings that we're having at the high school level. And I will say the hope with the computer science is to offer the AP next year because Project STEM and Amazon have a partnership to support that.
And Jess, I love in the elementary buildings how you have Fran, Niall, and Joanne doing the science piece. I think that's amazing because some kids are wired that way. And to give them that opportunity is fantastic.
Yeah, it's awesome. And they're loving it. So Fran and Joanne are just eating everything up. And so all of our kids at the elementary buildings now are engaged with science with a guaranteed and viable experience for them. And so then, when we're thinking about supporting Project Lead the Way, our elementary students are also engaged in coding in a systematic curriculum as well. We have 2 teaching assistants who are just knocking it out of the park in terms of facilitating that. So again, it's just going to be us having a planned response to our kids coming up, being more and more prepared.
By the way, the dual credits are great. I think that's phenomenal. I think what we also, the reason this is also great, if we remember a couple years ago, we had the salutatorian was Andrew Macariello, and he said, you know, he had like a phenomenal SAT score. He was he went to Brazil, I think, as an exchange student. He like did everything, right? Yep. And he couldn't get in to schools, and the feedback was, it's not that your grades aren't good enough, you haven't taken enough AP courses, you haven't taken enough college courses, didn't matter his grades. So just having the opportunity from a transcript, it's competitive now, and the grades aren't enough, the SAT is not enough, so I think it's really good for all those reasons.
And
It's phenomenal.
what I hope is that a child who's going multiple pathways can find plenty of opportunities that interest them through our high school program.
Well, and you've got 17 and 18-year-old children trying to figure out what they're gonna do the rest of their life. This gives them at least a chance to say, not that, or yes, I have
Rule
interest.
it in, rule it out, right? So like biomedical science, the teacher said to me, I asked all the kids in the beginning of the year, like, who wants to be in the medical field? And I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know, but now the way that they're engaged with prosthetics and the hands-on tools. They have some cool stuff. Sure, scientists on our hands. So then just to kind of close out, another piece that's new this year is we have a different pathway for kids. And quite honestly, because we're offering the economics and government as the dual credit, most of our seniors enrolled in that could be eligible to get the seal on their diploma. So it's called the Seal of Civic Readiness. Again, something from the state that I had a great team of teachers this summer who came in and worked on this application. It was approved. And so it's, again, just another pathway for our students to say, hey, really interested in my community, really interested, you know, in understanding civics and my role in that. So they can work on acquiring the seal. And you can see that just kind of tells you different pieces in terms of criteria for what they need to be able to obtain that seal. But again, my goal for you was to understand that so much of this came from teachers having great plans and hopes and interests for kids to offer a more diversified program. And so it really just ultimately benefits our kids, which is awesome.
The commitment comes at a cost, right? You heard that number of $130,000 this past summer, including stay and play. But that's teachers saying, you know what, you know, usually I'm a 10-month employee. I think I started this school year telling you guys that we're a 12-month organization. And so many of our staff are saying, yeah, we want to take that time to really continue to learn and meet. So that's off to them.
All right, so not an awkward segue to business. There you go.
Well, let's not forget, all that stuff is great, but you can't do it.
Well done, Brian. Well done.
So very quick, quasi state of the non-instructional departments, transportation, food service, O&M, and we'll finish on my favorite topic. long-range management plan. So in transportation, we wanted to frame it in two categories. So the efficiencies we've seen this year, and then also dovetailing that with the challenges that we're still going to face. So in terms of efficiencies, leadership, and then the summer planning that relates to that coming line first. So in the area of leadership, we transitioned this year. We have Sam Eldred, who is now a co-head bus driver with John Tolley. Yana was a co-head bus driver, is now moved back into dispatch, and it's also helping us revamp our inventory controls, shipping risk. Federal grants, a lot more purchasing is happening. It's a lot more inventory moving in and out, which is stuff we still have to protect. So in short, Sam is working under 19A certification, which is really just transportation, compliance, and safety, and an SEDI school bus driver instructor certification. So once you have those, you're qualified to sit as a transportation supervisor. So that's kind of a long range plan with Sam to transition her into that role. So how that relates to summer planning is she did a lot of work with some of her team over the summer, revamping everything we do in the area of transportation, try to make some corrections to what we've done in the past, and then also get us ready for 22, 23. So what I mean, first and foremost, rerouting. We're actually down 2 drivers net last year to this year. However, we have every single route covered by an actual driver as opposed to myself doing a full-time route. So how we did that is through rerouting, getting routing efficiencies, and part of what I'll talk about is the transportation audit. You're all aware of what we went through.
Part of that audit was we were at 20% utilization. Of the kids that were scheduled to be on a bus, we were really only transferring around 20 to 30%. We're up in the area of 60% this year, which is all due to Sam's team going through the routes, using our routing software to get them more efficient. And then coming up with routes that are not necessarily as long, but also they're a little more packed, meaning we're using the buses better. Which any building principal wants to, speak up at this. I think as of today, our buses are getting on time, right? Yes, yeah. An area we're working on students, student management, we're trying to standardize how that's done between buildings and how that gets back to the bus driver, so it's not just lost in ether, right? So Sam and team are working with the building principals on. Driver training. First time due to their new contract, we were able to bring that in over the summer and work on routes. So they've been instead of making changes on the fly in the first week, they're coming in over the summer, running them, coming back to Sam and John and saying, hey, this doesn't really make sense. Let's do it this way. So they came in, I think, 3 times over the summer, not just to do that, but to work on pre-trip, what they're supposed to do, post-trip, what they're supposed to do, do's and don'ts, reminders, just things that really haven't happened in the past couple of years. So things are really starting to tighten up over there in the bus garage in a good way. And then finally, in the area of training, we had somebody come in from PTSI, which I believe is the Pupil Transportation Safety Institute. So long story short, in the past, we've had TCIS training. I didn't really try to say what that is. There you go. Managing behaviors. And I believe it was taught more by people from the classroom. So this was essentially the same thing, but by an experienced bus driver slash transportation supervisor came in and spoke to all the bus drivers, full day, 9 to 4 training. And so a lot of things where they just didn't know, I don't know how to handle this situation. They're able to sit there and walk through it. They talked legally, what are they able to do, not do. And it was phenomenal. I sat in a couple hours of it when I could. It was great. And that's something we're going to bring this gentleman back and probably the fall, later in the fall, or maybe in the winter with all the drivers. Just do a, hey, here's what we talked about. Is it working? Is it not? What are the things you want to talk to him about and bring up? So again, we're just continuing to tighten up transportation operations. In terms of challenges, as I said, we had a transportation audit that brought out a few things we're going to work on. So one is going back to that student count, looking at our fleet size. Right now, we're a touch too big, I think, in the area for larger buses. And if you think how that relates to staffing and finding qualified drivers, if we can transition more to smaller fleet, people don't need to have the same qualification. They can actually potentially have more drivers with smaller vehicles. I think you could have potential coaches driving vehicles if they're smaller and the team's smaller. So one item that the audit found and things are open to.
We just lose the some years for each, so we're just getting your banner lease to the potentially come in. It's a
Potentially downside that and then shift that funding. Again, continued routing efficiency, so getting our system to speak with their system. Example, one issue is you can block off roads. While we're finding you block the road, it doesn't block it for every route, you go and block it on every single route. Things like that, where we can get our tech team with their tech team to make the routing software better. The routes are going to continue. And then, finally, staffing is the last one I have there. It's going to continue to be a struggle, but I'm happy to report right now we're in great shape. We have 18 drivers, we have 3 full-time subs, and on top of that, we have 4 to 5 people in the transportation office that can also hop on. They also Sam, John, Yana can drive the smaller vehicles, and you have our 2 mechanics who can also sell it. So as of right now, we're in a great position. There's quite a few that can retire at any time. And we still are going to continue, beating the drum, recruiting. We have a couple ideas to work with the union on, try to enhance those efforts a little bit. So you'll see us continue to present in the budget. We're going to have positions to bring them on. I think to Brian, I read your point. I'm fully on board with having years with double up, so to speak. So as you transition people out, having those overlap years. And even in this case, you can bring them on as bus aides, which we've been doing, and then working on it. Okay, if you're interested in this, we can pay, get you certified, and then bring them on as a drive.
And we sort of did that, not sort of, we did do that, like math wise, we're having a retirement in January, so we brought someone on. You know, in September, because. You know, has to be there. Take it on.
Two questions. Why are we going back to bus stops? Feedback on that.
So far, so good. Usually when I don't hear anything, that's a good sign. Again, any of you will hear anything different?
All good, really.
Wait till the snow flies. I hear they're still, you know.
And one thing we can do sort of, we talked about reaching out to retirees and seeing if there's anybody interested at those bus stops, not just being across the park, but potentially being a quasi monitor of adding bus stops. Well, some of those concerns, things that you have in bus stops.
We think it's a water level, right? So we're on the train, everything seems to be fine. Potentially neighbors are level well in the same vein as well. Thank you.
So overall transportation, I think we're in great shape right now. I still see articles with schools shutting down or going home because they don't have drivers. Had a report of people coming out of that position. Okay, food service, Dee does a fantastic job, not much to report there. Staffing, we're in a good position. We have in the contract, people in other areas can volunteer, not volunteer, but they can pay to work in food service. We have a couple that help out during the day, including bus drivers and bus aides. So you think that gap between runs, they go and they help out in the kitchen. Which seems to be working out really well. That's another point to retaining staff. They can get more hours with us. They're less likely to look elsewhere. So really the food service slide is about updates. So just a reminder, we are a CEP, so Community Eligibility Program, federally funded program. We are a CEP school, which means all meals are free. Having said that, we still have to bang the drum on free and reduced price lunch for lunch. So that has serious implications for state aid. For some reason, the state is still incorporating that as a variable and how districts are perceived in terms of wealth. If we don't receive those applications and we stop getting that, I've already seen that number start to tick down. It could potentially impact state aid going forward. So Asia's been great getting the bill share posts out. We have an online application for this. The only principal would know have the application and are going to be sending it out in mailings, have it available in open houses. But just in case you're asked, we're not at risk of losing that CEP status right now. But like I said, if at some point our income will gauge triggers where we're not eligible, that will become. Again, we're going to continue to focus on getting those purple ones sent to the district.
Forms, are they fillable and like click a button and go back? Yeah. And not all the posts have the
Almost.
for the lunch,
Yeah, that was for some reason when you went to fill it out, it said Norwich is no longer accepting applications. This latter something like that. There was some issue with the my school apps.
and then I asked a question on one of the posts, but I don't know if anyone's answering questions. But a lot of people have been commenting simply older kids that have large appetites in years past, they could get a text, but now they can't. So there's been a lot of, because the portion sizes are very small, like they get.
More chicken fingers.
Well, no, it's not even chicken fingers, it's
I know.
tiny, so I didn't know, like, do they have to pay for a second lunch or?
What's happening for us is that unofficially they can get a second lunch.
I think last year, but so it's cracking down.
Now, what we have to do is we have to account for every meal that goes out. So we're asking all students to punch their codes again, right? So before they were just, got a meal, click, there's one, click, there's two. We're just counting meals that went out the door. Now to verify that, we need students to enter their passcode, which then triggers. Scott Ryan's already had a meal.
Right,
That's all that's covered with this program. If you want a second meal, it's at your cost.
is that your cost? So for kids that can't afford that second meal. that was the issue that was brought forth by my son. He's like, there are some kids that can't afford that second meal, but they're still hungry.
Yeah.
Is there,
And I don't know how to
I don't know
to
either,
circumvent that, right? We have to play by those rules,
right?
right? And so unless we are supplementing the cafeteria fund, which, underperforms every year anyway, we're, contributing to it. I'm not sure the way around that.
Choice. Because it's like, peanut butter and jam. You know, power bar, something along that line where the cost, the economic effect is real small.
You would be shocked if you saw the limitations on what we can serve versus what we can.
Okay.
Because of sodium contents and, everything on this, it's amazing.
And also pros and cons in this program.
I know, that's, yeah.
So it's free at that cost.
There's nothing free, right? Here's free.
No cost. no.
What it should say is reference to no cost, right? It's not
Actually,
cost.
Brian might know more about this, but I do believe that when you fall into a certain level of bracket of poverty, then it opens up more doors. Like teachers, we pay for it because that's the bracket that we're at right now. So it's so super important for us to fill out these forms and to have that accurate picture of where we are as a
Right.
community.
We
That's
provide
all.
snack after school, for example.
Yeah.
But it's gonna come down, grab bars, could it be fruit, things like that. We have sharing tables that may or may not be, aboard. You don't want your apple. You have to take your apple, right? If you don't want your apple, you can put it on the sharing table kind of thing,
Well, that's why I asked about the form to make sure it's easy for people to fill out.
It's not easy.
Right, it
There's
isn't.
nothing easy about it.
No.
It's a national form.
No, I know that, yeah.
We don't have the ability to change it. So what we're asking is our social workers to really help with this campaign.
So long and short of it is what it is.
To an extent, I mean, we can always go back, our food service is hopefully managed by BOE, so I'm sure there's things we can go back and talk, and yes, these questions.
But last year, we heard, kids saying, oh, where's the chicken patties? We go and have a conversation with people with both supply issue, chicken patties. It's a hot commodity. Yes, do this. So, yeah, right? So we want to stroll. Right?
So today, so I know, and maybe this is later on, but the farm to school grant and stuff, will that be partnering with? I mean, is local food should be brought in, or what does that mean?
You want to talk, there is a
That's later on in the agenda.
New York Thursdays we're currently in, which is meals locally sourced every third Tuesday.
And the last day you get salmon.
Um, 21st.
I can, but again, we're years away from
Right.
being able to produce something here at school that can then be supply the kitchen in advance to be able to then consume, right? So, yes, that's our goal, but it's gonna take a while to get there. We
Right,
have some
yeah.
great plans
I
between
got
that
it, Graham.
now in 2023, partnering with the Health Network, who is really going to own the majority of grant management. And so I'm excited about that collaboration.
I'm off the board next year. I can buy it.
There you go. There you go.
Last year, it seems like a lot of the breakfast, especially it gives them your high sugar content, a lot of Pop-Tarts, a lot of sugary cereals. And the students in my class just got tired of Pop-Tarts, and I didn't know why those choices were made.
Again, I think it goes to Scott's point of last year, overseas, which manages not just ours, but a lot of districts purchasing in food service itself, shortages everywhere. A lot of times. So it was really, they were just kind of kicking at that point.
I was always excited to see the Cheerios with the corn flakes with no sugar or little sugar.
Yeah, you can see Cocoa Krispies in. It's Lucky Charms, not Lucky Charms, Raisin Bran, kids need that. Also. So,
Yeah, Star. I know we're gonna move on. I've asked a few times, but it'd be great to have the food service people come into the presentation sometime.
From BOCES.
Or here, because I think to be able to have them at a board meeting in a long time. It'd be good to have them here and present the basic presentation and.
And we had her, Dee,
Yeah,
into the staff orientation and actually gives, spread out some statistics, how many meals they typically serve in a year. It's nice to just put a face.
Yeah.
2%.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay, moving on. So in terms of operations and maintenance, you've seen this slide before, and literally just lists some of the various initiatives or things we've either invested in currently or planning to. Obviously, that has an impact. I think it's recruiting staff in. One of the biggest pieces we still struggle with is finding qualified people in this area, specifically in maintenance. We actually might have gotten lucky today with the interview, but we may be bringing on a third maintenance person. Right now, we want to talk back to the metrics conversation. Usually you're looking at square footage. So industry standard in terms of cleaning, 8-hour schedule is 28,000, anywhere 30,000 square foot per person. At the high school, middle school complex, I mean, we were at 100,000 per person. So, yeah, we've really been working hard on getting custodians, maintenance in the district. Thankfully, with the wayfair contract, that ratio went way down. However, as part of our duty to the union, we still have to advertise and attempt to hire, which we are. And today, there was 3 interviews for custodians alone. So I'm starting to see applications actually go back in, which is nice. We're about 4 people a day being at that industry standard over here on this complex. And currently at Gibson and Brown, we're there. So some good news. It's going to continue to be something we fight. No one wants, not, I should say no one. There are people that come in and request to work that second shift. It's just a very tough shift to hire. So we had Scott and I working with the union on a couple ideas that will help with improvement in that area. Because like I said, we really can't have school places. We were struggling for a while. It's gotten better. There's still hiccups in that area. But we're taking them again. Okay, and then bring it on home. So a few bullets there. It's crazy, but budget season 23-24 is already here. So just as we had the audit to close out 21-22, we're in 22-23. We're already talking about 23-24. So really, with that point, it's going to continue to be collaborative. Ms. Oliver already prompted me to get to a faculty meeting, and I asked the other principals to send me their schedule. So I'm going to try to continue having as much collaboration in this process as possibly can. So it has involved building principals, it has involved department leaders, and so we're going to go out for faculty meetings. Just try to reframe thinking around budget way, not just the same thing year after year after year. Here's what you spend. There's other ways to think about it. How does what you're submitting align with your PLT group? How does that PLT request align with the mission and vision of the initiatives? Just as people about earlier.
Prime, it's a team, not a group, buddy.
There you go. So again, I think it's going to continue. We're going to try to make it more collaborative every year, and actually looking forward. So economic outlook and challenges ahead. So in my circle, 2 buzzwords that I continue to hear and read about are recession and inflation. Inflation's here. We've already seen utility costs are out across the board. And we talked about food costs are out, maybe the cost of paper is so that's going to continue at least in the foreseeable future. Something that's interesting I've been reading about is more the state comptroller not only audits districts, they audit most state agencies throughout the state. That's their job, is to be kind of the watchdog for use of taxpayer funds. They've been reporting on New York City pretty frequently in terms of its fiscal health, and that impacts us because New York City is a big economic driver from our state. A lot of those dollars that are generated down there flow back up to us. So you think Wall Street, the stock market, nobody check your retirement account. So what that means is that the comptroller is basically saying there's a few factors we're seeing that are throwing up some red flags. New York City is projected potentially having budget shortfall of $10 billion by 2026. A lot of that's related to mismatching of these influx of federal dollars being tied to positions or things that are going to continue after the budget on. So right now they're in great shape. They have above projected tax collections. They have federal funds, pension obligations that are really great. And then the stock market is now a bull market in the past decade or so. That's all sort of tampered. So in our state, when you have a lot of high income earners that pay a lot into the till based off of capital gains, you buy stock goes held high, tax on capital gains, market's down, Not only that is down in terms of tax revenues, but people that work on Wall Street that pay income tax, the bonuses are down, their salaries are down, whatever. So the comptroller is basically saying there's a lot of red flags coming up right now in terms of the economic health of the city. You know, the mayor has already announced 3% across the board cuts. Which is something we look at, you know, as we can plan or go into the next budget season. We have to have another greater because 70% have already come to state, which means we're heavily reliant on the state for our funding. So nothing to worry about right now, as you saw at the beginning. We're going to continue to plan ahead, put money into reserves, so we don't know what's coming. We have something to fall back on as far as those reserves. We're going to continue to preach that every budget season. Right?
All right, so you didn't use the word cliff. I noticed it. But my the cliff, I'll use it, right? And that's what, you know, a lot of this times I'm going to so.
Oh, we don't have any pictures of kids or puppies to bring it home, but well, that's really bad.
Yeah, that's it. Any questions, concerns from the board? Good. Huge thanks to Jess and Brian, put that together for you tonight. We had a lot of, I think, overall, a great start, you know, in conversation, reflecting on the conversation I had today with some teachers. You know, there's a lot of new, right? It's reinventing itself, maybe not reinventing itself, but sort of, I'll call it innovation at Norwood City School District. And hopefully you've seen that over the course of the last 2 years. With that though, there are challenges. And one of the greatest challenges right now that we are facing is the structure that supports this work. The demands have changed. Jess and I went to a conference a week and a half ago, and one of the speakers that spoke used a phrase that I'll share with you is stop trying to focus on doing better. In education, right now, we have to focus on doing different, right? And I think that's one of the greatest things that's happening across the state right now. And I think Norwich is a great example of that, is really trying to focus on doing different. However, that comes with challenges. And one of the biggest challenges is, what is the structure that supports the work? If we're asking people to collaborate, we had to create that time, right, for all of our staff. If we're asking teachers to be responsive to all the demands of every single parent in their class, and for some teachers at the secondary level, a PE teacher, for example, could be 400 kids, right? If we're asking them to be responsive within 24 hours, what is our structure that supports that? And right now, we don't have that. So when we administer these types of screeners, we have to stop regular day operations. We have to shut down instruction, think about all the different moving parts, including contractual language, all of that stuff. Say it again, we don't have a structure that supports that doing it different right now. And yet, in conversation with union moving forward, that's what we have to really think about. As a result, what you'll hear is that volume and pace can be difficult for a lot of our staff. That's real. We have to make sure that we're thinking about personal wellness in that transition as well, doing things different. Okay, so we're not here to say we're doing everything great right now. There is absolutely room for improvement in everything that we do, but we are continuing to keep our eye on the prize, which is that progression and design experiences for kids. And I hope you saw that tonight. Okay. Awesome. Real quick, as a follow-up to superintendent update, we have Norwood City School District has collaborated again with Walgreens to provide a food clinic. You missed today's, which was more. However, on October 5th, from 1 to 3 at Gibson, if you as a board member would like to stop in, your insurance card, help yourself. There's a form that you'll have to fill out. We'll send you at the conclusion of this meeting. Fill out in advance to help you with speedy vaccine.
Are they doing COVID vaccines too, or just flu?
This is just food.
Because I noticed Oxford was doing COVID too.
They have bottles, right? It's in the morning.
We have certain forms. But then I read they shouldn't get them on.
Correct. All right, October 5th, 1 to 3. I don't come all will be broadcasting that again to all of our staff.
Okay, let's keep moving. We've been here a while already, so. Number 3, discussion items. So athletic handbook was added recently to the. Mr. Ryan, do you want to start off the discussion?
So the athletic handbook went into effect around the third week in August, sometime around the initial coaches meeting for fall sports. And what I can tell you is it's generated a little bit of conversation at the board level, which is why I think the board is asked to have a discussion item. And I think, in reflection of this, what I just spoke of was pace and volume have resulted in what could be perceived as, an absence of effective communication. And so when I reflect on that, I really think about where have we been, where are we now, and where are we going? As we continue to aspire as a model organization, right, we want to maintain high expectations for all kids. Not just those kids that engage in either athletics or extracurriculars, all kids, right? And so we had an absence for quite some time in the area of accountability for students that participated in both athletics as well as extracurriculars, okay? Because of that major void, there were some poor practices that were happening in district, right, that didn't reflect well on us. And so what we did was we shifted to what I would characterize as best practice, as would the president of New York State Public High School Athletic Association characterize as best practice. And we put a policy or a handbook rather in place, okay? When I sent that to you, I titled it as athletic policy or athletic code of conduct. And I think that language can confuse Board of Education. Right? My reflection, I thought, you know what, absolutely. And when you open that document, the title page or the cover page said athletic handbook. Again, can confuse the Board of Education. Not intentionally, right? I saved that as, that was my document. I saved it as that. So there's a kind of a conversation happening at the board level, around what is policy and what is practice. And so again, another reflection I'd share with you is that in the absence of no practice around academic eligibility, for example, a vacation policy for students that engage in athletics. When we put something that we might consider as best practice in place, it is moving the needle from nothing to everything, right? And that's a drastic shift. Okay, so please, and right now, hear me say to you, I own that 100%. I didn't think about the impact that would have on how we perceive that as a Board of Education. In my mind, that was one step closer to being a model organization, okay? So I missed that step with you to effectively communicate that, okay? The pace was dictated by things that are really out of my control, but again, at the end of the day, I own that in terms of communication to you. August was also a very busy time, okay? So, long story short, is there any outstanding conversation that anybody wants to have around the athletic handbook as we move in the direction of, I think, malleability with respect to language within it? Again, it is intended to support and not address either student behavior or just academic eligibility or behavioral eligibility with a hammer, but rather we have these supports in place and we have these expectations in place for every single student that engages in that, okay? You've heard multiple times the multi-tiered system of support, right? You've heard multiple times the concept of response to intervention. All of those are in place when we write that and we bring that to the forefront as a practice. We know all of those things. We speak the jargon, but you as a Board of Education don't. What I can tell you is I haven't heard any from the community. The athletic director has had 2 phone calls about it. We've been able to find common ground on that. So I wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity to ask questions and know that, by the way, it's draft, right? The speed in which we put it into place was to ensure that we started the school year with consistent practice throughout the school year, right? But we can always do better with respect to how we word things so that our community understands that we are supporting students rather than punishing them.
So this is obviously mine. I mean, I was the lightning rod on this, so I'll start the conversation. It's called an athletic handbook. Is it athletics or extracurriculars as well? Both, right?
So it's intended to encompass all, and that's one of the things, right, that we recognized after this. We didn't have, if we're saying all students, right, we couldn't have one thing in place for just students that are athletes versus those students that aren't extracurriculars. So we wanted both.
And so for me, and I know policy and practice, it is the gray line. There's no doubt about it. It is not black and white. It's not that easy, but when you have an academic, I'm going to forget the vacation thing for a second. I'll come to that, but when you have an academic expectation that exists across all students that do anything after school ends, I find that I can't figure out why that's not policy. That feels like policy. If it was just athletics, that feels like it could be practice. But when it's across anything any student would do after school, that feels a tremendous amount like policy. I don't disagree that it's good to have, that we should have something in place. I have a comment about what's in place. We'll talk about that in a second, but and I don't want to slow anything with the bureaucratic process of a first and a second read and a final approval, but that's the method by which a school board operates. So to me, I felt like personally, I felt like it was rushed. I'm not saying it was intentionally rushed because it was trying to be forced as a practice versus a policy, but I think, in my opinion, for retrospect, if we look back retrospectively, it's across all, therefore it seems like it's much more policy than practice. That'd be the first thing. The second thing I would say is we haven't heard a lot of feedback. Grades just got pulled 2 days ago for this particular practice policy or otherwise, number one. Number two, on the vacation side, that's going to come up, you'll probably have a handful of people that will call in April, because that's when the big one's going to come around. So I think that's why we haven't heard a lot. I would guess, I coach soccer, I asked the parents, they came home, they signed it. And I said, did they read it? They're like, I didn't read that, I signed it. It said, my kid said I needed to sign this to play. And that's unfortunate, but that's the reality of probably a lot of those things. So for me, that's the practice policy conversation. In terms of what's part of it, I'm sorry, I'm making a bunch of stuff out. If you want to stop me and address anything, feel free, but in terms of the words within it, I think it is best practice to have academics as part of extracurriculars, athletics or otherwise. I think that is absolutely true. What I believe in doing a lot of digging and asking around statewide, not just in the local region, is that a better practice than if somebody is failing 2 or more subjects, they're out of that activity for 2 weeks, is to say, if someone's failing, pick the number 1, 2, whatever makes sense. You guys know better than me. That they have to have an academic plan with those teachers. And if they're following the plan, they continue their activity. Because most of the kids that are failing 2 or more subjects, telling them to just do better in the next 2 weeks isn't going to work. They're not going to go to the teacher because most of them don't go to the teacher today. They have some other roadblock to them achieving. So if you say they have to have a plan in place, I know that puts a lot of extra effort on the teacher. I understand that. And that's a challenge. I'm not saying that isn't difficult, but that would also be why I think we should take a little more time in thinking about it. But to me, that's best practice, because I can tell in my head, I can think of several kids who might get put in this situation. The moment it happens, they're going to shut down, say, well, forget it. I'm not playing this sport. I'm not doing this particular activity. And they're not going to go get the support they need. They're not going to magically just do better in the next 2 weeks. They're not going to magically figure out how to make it to the teacher's thing, in my opinion.
Can I respond? to
Yeah,
that?
please go there first. Yeah,
So we don't believe in magic. Okay,
either do I.
so in those 2 weeks, that plan will absolutely be in place. The coach will be involved, right? The teacher, if it's a single, if it's science, for example, if it's math, that they absolutely will be involved. That's why that 2 week period is there, to allow for that effort to be demonstrated, to say, are you taking advantage of the supports that are put into place? Right?
Agree, but why punish? Why instead say, student, if you make this effort, you continue to make that effort, you're therefore showing progress, continue to show progress. There's no need to punish them and remove them from the activity. We all know many kids, unfortunately or fortunately, that exist solely for their extracurriculars. If that wasn't for those extracurriculars, they would do everything they could to not walk through those doors in any given day. You take it away, I get that it's trying to be motivational to say, hey, now you're going to show up to these, but it doesn't work that way. And it's been shown time and time again. I think punishment is not the answer. The answer is finding a way. Now, if they don't then show up, then yes, you have no choice but to resign, to go in that direction. It's my opinion, right? I'm not saying everybody shares that, but I think a punishment model has been proven over time to not be a model that works.
I understand why you're calling it a punishment model.
Because they're not playing for those 2 weeks. They're not in the marching band. They're not in the school play. They're not going to ski
So
club.
there's a period of academic probation for the first 2 weeks, once it's full.
Yep.
They have 2 weeks while participating to be involved. If they continue to not take advantage of supports, that's when they're withdrawn.
So it's not, their grade doesn't have to come up.
Their grade absolutely has to come up in that 2 weeks. Most of the time, Brian, it's about completion and pass.
Okay, well, because often classes don't have grades in those 2 weeks.
Right, so that's a back end that we gotta make sure you're doing as well.
Right.
The other piece that's coming into play at the high school
Sure.
next week is the after school extension time.
That's great.
So right away, a child who's put on this sort of probation could remember while they're still playing, right? Still participating. Now they have that second opportunity right after school to be able to engage with a teacher or a teacher at the high school, to be able to say, hey, I'm making that effort to prioritize student end.
I promise the handbook does not read exactly that way.
Yep.
And that's a problem. We rolled something out that if by the letter of the law, I look at it and follow it, what you just said would not be true.
I don't want to play devil's advocate here, but I'm gonna. The law is written that if you go 56 miles an hour, you're gonna get a ticket. Police officers have discretion. Coaches have discretion.
They don't though. That's the whole point of policy.
But it's not policy.
But it should be, because it's for everybody. That's my point.
Everybody doesn't take advantage of extracurricular in place.
Everybody that does any extracurricular activity is now governed under an athletic handbook that we now are saying we're going to leave to somebody else's discretion. How can we do that? If someone else has the discretion, I'm the coach, my discretion. Oh, he gave effort, he's playing. Why? He's my best player. He's the best player on the basketball team.
That's.
It's my, oh, he's gonna go.
That subjectivity can't be there, Brian.
Exactly. So how, you can't do a 56-mile-an-hour discussion. It's got to either be or it's not. That's why it's policy, not practice. It's so crystal clear in my mind. And I get it. I'm one person. I can't win this argument. It's so crystal clear. If you're going to hold the line on academics, you hold the line. One way or the other. That's why it's a policy. If it's a practice and we're saying, oh, it's gray, then I'm, as the coach, I'm going to make my own decision. And most coaches especially, big games coming up, right? We're getting ready to go play sectionals. Oh, my discretion, everything's cool. Right, so, but then we're saying, did you put forth effort? That's a discretion,
Trying to remove that subjectivity, which is why it's not a great point average.
but it doesn't say that. It's not exactly spelled out in this place. We might be working towards that, and that's phenomenal. I think we should. The whole point is, if we're working towards something, don't rush it. There's no reason to rush. I know we have academic expectations, but rushing it to get it out, to then change it over time is not going to do anybody any good. Get it right the first time. Avoid all those things. I wholeheartedly stick by this. I will die on the hill for this because I 100% believe. I'm not saying we rushed it for the wrong reasons, but it came out way too quick. There's way too many questions, and people don't even know that they're going to have those questions because it hasn't come up yet. We haven't had to worry. Grades just got pulled 2 days ago on Monday or whatever for all these kids that are participating. So it hasn't even reared its head. I guarantee it will. And I guarantee that subjectivity, unless we close that loop, will continue to be a problem. And to me, that's why the whole idea of practice and policy, if they're the same and they're a hard written rule, practice needs to be followed just as much as policy, then why the heck have either one of them? Then everything will be a practice and you never have to worry about the board approving it. Or everything's policy and the board approves everything, and that's the way it is. To me, when it's everything that happens for anything that's extracurricular across everything, it seems like it's policy. So
You approve the code of conduct. Athletics and extracurriculars are an extension of the school day. The code of conduct applies whether you're here at 9 o'clock at night as a
Okay.
spectator or as
So
participating
so
athlete.
this rolls into the code of conduct in your opinion,
The code of conduct is what governs all of this.
okay?
Additionally, on top of that, right, the academic eligibility and or behavioral expectation is there.
So if
It's
this is
considered to be a privilege to participate in.
fair, so if this is a part of the code of conduct, then we just changed part of the code of conduct, a subsection, call it whatever you want. But we didn't approve that. I know that's not exactly what you said, but and I know you didn't like my words. I apologize. I don't mean it negatively. I just can't think of a better one. It feels like shoehorn. It feels like finding a creative way to get something out earlier that isn't getting approved. And that's not, and I'll finish this, my last point, because I'm gonna just start going in circles on this. And
Brian, help me understand, just like
Yeah.
you put it on as a discussion. You've already expressed all of that. The purpose of it being on the discussion. point
I don't think I've had a reasonable response to any of this other than to say, this is practice, not policy. And I yet to hear,
The last email was a reasonable response to you.
I don't think it answered the question of whether this is practice or policy. It was an opinion of, no, this is practice versus policy, and I don't think it's been heard. And I think it needs to be heard at this level, because I should not be, we didn't, to be fair, but I shouldn't be communicating all of this stuff. This has to come in this kind of form. It needs to. It can't exist on text messages or emails, which is why you responded appropriately, but I shouldn't then continue the discussion. It should come here. On the vacation end, to me, that's 100% practice. But what we're saying is the coaches need to administer a policy, a practice, excuse me, that, and I'm boiling it down. I know I'm not going to say everything perfectly, but that says if a kid takes vacation for a period of time, when they come back, they're going to miss a game. They miss practices for a game, they'll miss the game when they come back. To me, that's coach discretion 100% all the time. This was written, and people can say whatever they want, that it's wrong. It's written for spring break in the April timeframe typically, and that's why it's there. And the coaches want some teeth behind it. The coaches need to provide that teeth, because the way that's written, I told you this, I had 2 players that took vacation on my soccer team. I have 13 kids who play 11. 2 players take vacation. Both of them were for weddings. Of course, that would be approved, but it doesn't say that. It doesn't say decide which ones are approved and not. They shouldn't have played on Monday. There is no way in heck that I'm not playing those kids on Monday. No way. That would be the craziest thing ever. But the way it's written, that's what the way I'm supposed to administer that. That is, to me, very dangerous waters, that we're trying to say if a kid goes on vacation, they can't play when they come back. That's what it says. So if I can't field the team, I should just say, forget it, we're done. Sorry, kids, 3 kids went on vacation, can't field the team, we're out. We're forfeiting these games. That's coach discretion. That's practice all day long. The coach needs to decide if they want to put those rules in place and follow them. And that should not, in my opinion, be part of a hard and fast athletic handbook. It just doesn't seem
It's
logical.
been coach's discretion, Ryan, and that's where the inconsistency has occurred.
Of course,
And as a result, we have to field phone calls around this program holds my child to a different standard than this program. How do we defend that?
so what you just said sounds a heck of a lot like a policy. Otherwise, what's the difference between policy and practice?
Can I just clarify something for myself in the back and forth here? So essentially, in a nutshell, Brian, what you're saying is, this sounds like policy. It should have been brought forth as a policy approval. This doesn't sound like practice.
Yes.
Okay.
Otherwise, I still like what you just said. And listen, I'm not trying to be argumentative, but if we're going to say something like the vacation thing needs to be there because we don't want to continue to field questions, and I understand that. I know what happened.
That's more than impact.
No, not for you. No, I'm sorry. I shouldn't put those words together. But I know what happened 6 or 7 months ago with baseball. I was a part of some of that. And I understand the challenge that went into that. And there's other sports too in the spring. But if we're going to do that, we're going to say we need hard and fast rules because we need to put teeth behind it. Then I don't see how that's not policy then. If it's practice, then I can't understand the difference between the two. Because if one says I must then, and the other says something different, like it's up to some kind of discretion, then I'm completely lost. It seems like it's practice when it's convenient. I'm not saying you're trying to do something to be convenient, but it's practice when it's convenient. It's policy when it's not. Otherwise, it's policy if we're going to hold people to it and it's a black and white line. If it's gray, then to me, that's a discretion. And that's a practice-driven conversation. So I don't know. I'll stop talking. My fellow board members may have something to say, they may not. But to me, this was at a minimum was rushed out way too quick without having enough conversation, enough forethought into the words that were in that handbook, let's call it, without a lot of clarity as to what's going to happen. And yes, it's developing. It's okay to let it develop for a year. We're not going to all of a sudden implode if we take the year to continue to develop the language or put something, kind of trial this out and run it through what would happen. And let's figure that out. We wouldn't implode. I think it was forced out. I agree. I think we should have whatever policy practices or other in place, but it felt awfully rushed. And if I'm on an island and I'm an island, that's the way it'll be. That's the way it's going to end because the board is members. There are boards of 7, not a group of 1, but for me, that needed to be heard. And yeah, I'll leave it at that.
So I think,
So I-
sorry,
I was not gonna say anything. I just feel like the discussion, just in defense of putting this on the discussion, helps me understand the issues that were at play. So I appreciate putting it out.
no, that's fine. So I think, one of the things that we've been clarifying is policy versus practice. And we got to a presentation. with the Lindsay,
I wanted that.
so and I think it can be, and I think Scott's plan is to have it be next month. Just couldn't get it arranged. So the policy committee was able to see a presentation by our attorney Lindsay the other day when it came to policy and practice, and it helped clear some things up a little bit and what the difference is when you're setting one or the other. And I think you touched on it a lot, Brian, that, practice is kind of a guide and you can follow it when it's convenient, right? Or not convenient. Whereas policy, you have to follow to the T legally. But I think hearing an attorney explaining, maybe giving her the situation as a whole and seeing what her opinion is on it. I think it'll be beneficial to the board. Unfortunately, couldn't be done in time for this meeting. Should be on the docket for next meeting. But I agree with a lot of what was said in the fact that, first of all, I'm so thankful that we finally put an academic policy into place for extracurriculars. They're the only school district in the area that didn't have one of some sort. I agree, it was done in probably too quickly. I also know that it wasn't done without research either. A lot of the other school districts' models were taken into consideration. New York State Public High School athletic guidelines were taken into consideration. But when we're putting something together like that brand new, going from the left to the right is gonna be shocking every time. And I do feel that the way it's written is too constricting. I feel there has to be a lot of leeway for effort. And the example I've used when I've had this conversation before is I'm no good at science. I may have a 55 average in science, but I may work my butt off in science. I'm home studying every night. I'm doing all the labs. I'm going to see my teacher after school or on free bells. I just can't move that way because science just isn't my thing. It doesn't, right? We can't punish that kid. So effort has to be considered all the time, every time. But how do we gauge that effort, right? So what's in place, and you said it, you sat right there and said that effort will be seen as improvement, right? How are we gauging that effort to make sure that a kid is not held out when the effort's being put in and there's just not numerical improvement? So can you explain some of that as
Yeah,
well?
so the only thing you can do right now is allow for the teacher to inform whether or not the effort is there, right? And if a plan is put into place for supports, and that student is doing all the things they need to do, and that's where we have the discretion to say, yes, absolutely, you're doing all the right stuff. It may not be a 65 yet, it might be a 64, right? Or there might not be a test that will allow you to improve that. What if it's about completion of tasks? If it's about coming to school, which means you haven't completed any work or you haven't been there for any assessments, you need to make that work up. You make your labs up, right? That's a lot of majority of what we're talking about. And remind you, last year we had at one point in the sophomore class, 78% of sophomore class failing one or more classes. We had 50% of those students at 18 or more absences, right? And yet they're able to participate and represent Norwich City School District. So student comes before athlete in a hyphenated terms. Right? And that's the piece that we're really trying to impress. What I know, you guys don't know, is that all of the things Brian was talking about, these things are in place and they will be in place. There's a little bit of subjectivity there, right? You get this teacher that's a hard nose versus this teacher that's like, you know what, you've done what you need. I'm not sure how we get around that yet, but it gets us closer, right, to being able to say that we have improved approved our expectation, right? To say the academic piece comes first. I'm not sure how we get past that. However, when I gave this for review to the president of NISBA, he said this is comparable to many districts, right? And gave me a few exemplars to look at. So I want you to know, I didn't pull this out of the air. Joe Alger, my director of athletics, didn't pull this out of the air. It says that we didn't come at this from the approach of we want to shoehorn it or we want to penalize kids in the punitive model, right? Please know that.
It also comes with that system of support after school.
Yeah.
I gotta just kind of make sure that what I'm saying is said to everybody. It sounds like everybody is pretty much on the same page. But we're on the same page that there about what should be valued and what should be seen as important. And to me, it just sounds more like it's like a discussion about how we do that and how we communicate about that and clarify, is this actually practice or policy? And so we see that there are some holes in our communication about that. And that's more where we should, I think, focus in the future on something like this, because it doesn't sound like there's physically the content, it's just more of the procedure of how this is approached.
And I agree wholeheartedly. I've said that from day one, that I think the academic portion is policy, because we have to hold kids. If we want to hold people accountable, they have to be held accountable. I think the vacation part of this is practice. It's clear. We just talked about the need for discretion, and each sport should be able to handle it appropriately. I've stuck by that. I know not every coach is going to agree with that. Not every extracurricular person is going to agree with it. You know, we talk about there's lots of holes, but we'll try to fill them. I think this is absolutely the right direction to go, and I've said that from day one. I just think we're misusing the term practice, or we're correctly using it, and therefore there's gray area that will be left up to discretion. If that's the case, then be prepared for the conversation with people to walk into this room and say, it's not fair. My son or daughter doesn't get to do X, Y, and Z, but this person over here gets to do A, B, and C because their teacher decided that it was okay. Or be prepared for, and listen, we can all pretend this doesn't happen. Be prepared for coaches to start calling teachers and saying, hey, I really need X, Y, and Z. We only got one game left. It's a sectional fun. That stuff happens when there's discretion. When there's not, that stuff is not allowed to happen. And I don't know how to close all those gaps, but I know that policy allows for less, practice allows for more. We better be darn careful that we understand how we're using that and how we're administering it. We're going to have a hornet's nest on our hands.
I think just some wordsmithing as well. Don't call it a vacation policy. Call it a missed participation, expectation. Yeah, it should just say, to be as simple as your coach. It could result in missed playing time, missed games, whatever, and forfeiture of games by your team. I think it almost feels, by calling it a vacation policy, it's almost feels like you're singling certain aspects out. Again, we had the conversation. I don't know a kid yet that planned their family vacation while they were still in high school. They don't have a choice. Is it always necessary to punish that kid? But there should be an expectation that says, look, if you miss practice or you miss a game, there's going to be consequences in the next game. Those were around when I was in school. And I think I used the example when I played baseball, I had strep throat for a week. I came back and didn't play for 2 weeks because I missed 2 games. So every game you missed, you had to sit for another game. Didn't matter what the reason was.
Yeah, I have an expectation as a coach. We very clearly say exactly what's expected, and we hold those kids accountable to it. There's been 2 kids that have missed games as a result of it. But I certainly don't need a document to tell me how to do that. So, or it could be a practice. If you want to make it a practice, fine. The document can sit and I can say, no, I'm going to hold us to the letter of the law to that practice because that's what's going to back me up. But I feel like I should have the ability to be able to make that decision.
Now, you said you did expectations for your team. Do you put that in writing to your team that they have the expectation and their parents are aware of it? They
Yeah, parents
sign up on
meeting
that?
coaches meeting or kids meeting
It's
in
all
writing.
right.
They see
Right.
it, they know exactly what's expected and they know what's going to happen.
And to me, that's the right way of doing it is, regardless of what athletic or music or what you're doing extracurricularly, the expectations of that program should be clearly communicated. And then to your point, if that expectation is clearly communicated, that's the expectation that we need to make sure we follow to your point 100%, because if you said that's expectation, then we start changing it to fit our needs, then we have a problem too. I think part of the whole problem with practice and policy at times is policy gets too broad, which then makes practices have to be more specific than they should be. And then eventually becomes policy, because our policy is so broad in language that we try to develop practices along that policy, but policy needs to be more specific, with the practices then being broader, if you will. And I think sometimes, we gotta look at doing it that way to make sure that's being done.
Clearly we need to get past this subject. So for me, maybe it's the fact that if we're going to have someone come talk, maybe this can be the example, we run it through and we can hear back from whoever the lawyer is. And that's maybe the easiest next step to go on. It's not like anything's gonna change them, or is going to be a problem in the next month in any more way than it is or isn't as we stand here. So to me, that's a logical place to go next.
That was just to close this out, I want.
I have another comment.
Okay.
I didn't want to interrupt. Just to clarify, the athletic handbook or whatever it's called, is a part of the code of conduct. So it should be on the website. Well, and also you can't find the athletic handbook anywhere on the website. So that was my thing about that. I also want you to know if marching band students, musical kids had a sign this. I felt it was really rushed. I put that in my original email as well. And I'd like us to review the code of conduct at a future meeting or a policy subcommittee, because according to the website, hasn't been last amended since March of 2015.
Okay, regarding the athletic handbook discussion. Then the next step would be. It in this meeting or in policy, it should be specifically reviewed. What is the
I'm more than comfortable.
consensus?
I'm more than comfortable with the policy group doing it, if that's the avenue by which the person's coming to speak.
Well, I think we need to hear from the attorney as a group first.
Yeah.
On the difference between policy and practice.
Okay.
Based upon what's stated there, then we can decide next steps with this.
Okay,
If it should be a policy, then yeah, it should go to the policy committee, and we should work on it in conjunction with the administrative team and the athletic department. But I can tell you right now, that the policy committee, being on it, has no intention of writing this thing ourselves.
Well, that's how we're
Yeah, yeah, so it would,
already have that having.
yeah, so it would just be, it would be a committee that they would want to pass by before we brought it to the board. And one of the interesting things we did find out though during that meeting is you don't necessarily have to have a second and third reading of stuff. If everybody seems big, you can vote to have a one-time reading of policy. Especially with simple stuff, or if there's simple changes in a revision in a policy, policy that you're required to have. So there's 50 policies that you are state required to have. There's no sense in having a second and third reading because they are required, the verbiage in there is required. So they only require, we can vote to just do the first reading and approve. So just as an FYI going forward.
all right, so we'll send this back to the policy committee for next steps. So we'll move, or. I'm
We're gonna hear from the
hear from the attorney. There's just so much going on here, so.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other discussion regarding that? All right, 2023-2024 cell phone policy.
I just wanted to engage the board's conversation around this. I've sent multiple articles, links to look at, and I am going to be back, so I want to provide an opportunity for some discussion.
There's nothing proposed currently at this time, requires a motion.
What other schools around us do, you know, yeah.
Very, right, which is why what we said, again, just to come back to, is we've committed to really taking the year to really look at what's some of the trends nationwide, what's the best practices in place around this. Things are continuing to evolve, as you've seen some of the articles that I sent you. So I have some ideas of how to dovetail that into the community action team and use of thought exchange. And I want to kind of bring those two things together. But I just wanted to open up to say, is there any conversation that's happening that I'm
There's a
not aware
girl
of?
in school out in Rochester that did it first and incorporated the cell phone lock bags.
Do they have a lot, he did that in Schumann. I had a hard time giving up my phone. I couldn't find it.
Yeah, there's a,
But that you put your phone in like a lock bag.
yeah, again, there's a lot of practices in place. A lot of those practices rely on staffing, right? That's what I want you to really be thinking
My
about.
concern is who's enforcing it.
Who's enforcing it, right? That's the biggest thing. And so those are some of the things that I want to talk about, is that when you compare, you know, a specific school district or practice at a specific school district to us, really be thinking about it through the lens of what is their existing staffing, what's their student population, right?
My first
Graphics, those types of things.
Make them enforcing it.
We don't want to enforce it, however, he has to right now, right? So that's why we're talking about it as a barrier to learning. That's the lens that we're looking through. Is it a barrier to learning, given the current practice that supports cell phone use at Norwich City School District, which is, again, not a universal, not consistently applied, right? Worst thing about policy is enforcement, consistent enforcement.
When you say is it a barrier to learning, do you mean like having a policy like that, or do you mean?
Cell phones.
Yeah,
Cell phones in the classroom, right,
and then it's over.
are barriers to learning.
Ultimately,
That's a claim.
it becomes a practice though, in terms of how it's enforced.
It won't be policy that you'll pass, right? It'll be something in the code of conduct that you'll pass that will speak specifically to cell phone management.
Okay.
Well, barrier to learning also, I don't, liability maybe is the wrong word, but I mean, it like encourages physical aggression, fights, whatever you want to call it, because kids are waiting with their phones because they know someone's going to get in a fight, and you know, kids are posting all kinds of crazy, inappropriate things with their in school that nobody could possibly know about, whether they're in a stall of a bathroom or they're at the lunch table and hiding. I mean, it's just like at some point it feels, I don't, liability may be strong, but it feels like some level of liability.
Phones become weaponized. That's
Yeah.
the problem.
Yeah, exactly. That's
We originally embraced phones and said, oh, it's great, I can use my scientific calculator on my phone.
yeah,
That's gone.
my new CI.
Yeah, it's no longer the intent. The intent is
Honey, that's
something.
our target.
No more TI 85. Turn your thing sideways.
How we manage like student behavior, that's multiple layers, right? And I think one of the things we talked about last year as Board of Education is how does the school district govern use, right? And how much sort of leeway does the administration have when it comes to what they can say or do with their electronic device? It is secondary level specifically, it is becoming an absolute nightmare. So, anyway,
I think you're right though, Scott. I think that the challenge is exactly what you said. A policy or whatever put in place that can't be enforced is the worst kind of thing. They're putting so much emphasis on teachers doing that. It's just so, I don't know how you can teach with phones.
this has to be a community-wide effort. Right. We have to have that support at home to be able to do this, because inevitably what's going to happen is you will be suspending students for insubordination, refusal to comply with reasonable requests, right? That's what you'll have, and that's going to go against our, you know, attendance growth that we're looking for. It's going to affect student achievement, it's going to disenfranchise students, it's going to have all kinds of negative effects. However, right, it's important to say when you're in school, your folks can learn. So it is a really big battle. So let's sort of grab the next bullet down. One of the things we haven't gotten clear about as Board of Education is the subcommittee known as the Community Action Team. So my proposal to you tonight, in the absence of any direction of the Community Action Team, is to say, why don't we spend some time thinking about how to engage our community in this conversation to really allow for their voice to be part of it? And we don't do that by inviting them to a whole meeting, but rather we do that through use of thought exchange. We've seen us do that at the end of last year, where we asked people to really voice their concerns and their ideas around a specific topic. And then people get to go back in and sort of rate it. And what bubbles to the surface are those things that are most likely, if you will. Just correct me if I'm incorrect, is
You're on
keeping the lingo, right?
Like the bigger the word, the more important it is.
Not bigger the word.
Bigger the thought, or more folks who are in line with the thought. You rank the thoughts that you move through, and so the most popular opinion rises to the top. So what's nice about it is that it's confidential. It's not like a Facebook thing where it's like,
But there are
popularity contest or things like that. It's
So it does kind of.
Well, that's-
That you know.
But that's the demographic we're
Right.
looking at. They've got a cell phone, they've got online access, so I don't think you'd be alienating anybody that'd be affected by it, right?
Well, there's actually quite a bit of people that may have a cell phone but don't have a, I don't know.
So in
People
my,
I talk
in
to.
my mind, we could supplement that with a handwritten survey. We had to stick it in some literature that's being sent home. Most of the communication coming out of your buildings is electronic right now.
there's opportunities when folks are coming into the building to have some
Yep.
Chromebook setups. They can.
Yeah, I don't want to be fiscally responsible, but my concern with this effort is that all of you are at capacity with what's going on. We have instruction to worry about. We have management to worry about. Can we look at maybe having someone at like a consultant lead the effort on this? Because as a board, that committee, it's very hard to move forward with this type of effort as individual board members. Could we find maybe someone that's savvy or in that area that we could hire as a consultant to kind of lead the effort to do that footwork, like putting the thought exchange together? Thank you. Or go out and find best practices or talk to the Rochester school and say, who put this together? Who led the charge and how did you do it? So, we're in a good place. It's an important, very important topic. And I don't want to there's already too much on all of our administrators' plates already. So could we, maybe some of you have someone in mind who might be able to do that to kind of
Utilize this.
Sure.
it's possible. I don't know.
School boards, I mean, they ought to at least have a benchmarking data of some sort.
Yeah.
Right? So first step anyway.
Well, and the ideally, if you use the community advocacy to kind of take on, this is the current issue in school, to try to get community feedback. So they oversee that, and then, there's bound to be continued social issues that come up in the school area, and then the next time an issue comes up, then we're gonna do the same thing, and that is, engaging it with the community about the hot topic.
One of the things we criticize right on is communication, and when we do a survey like that, whether or not our community sees the outcome, right? So there's always criticism that we somehow rigged the outcome of, any sort of survey data. I would really charge the subcommittee, right, committee action teams to say, as soon as we get that back, let's turn that right back around and say, this is what you said. So it's not just Scott Ryan doing it, right? It's members of the subcommittee that continue to engage in social issue conversations with our community. And then we're going to have a student opportunity for their voice to be heard through thought exchange on the topic. Little by little throughout the year, we can walk that to a place to say we have an aggregate of information to help us inform where we go. Because town halls, right, aren't necessarily the right venue for this type of thing.
Well, the other thing too, like particularly with something like that, I think it's like we could spend hours and hours trying to figure out how to do it the right way, or you just get started, see the holes as you do it, and communicate as you try to communicate with with the community, and you'll get feedback, and you can then take and reorient your focus, and so. Yeah, because I think if we continue to spend a bazillion minutes trying to figure out exactly what this committee is gonna be, then we're gonna have a non-functioning committee.
Agreed. Which is why I'm bringing this idea to the table.
I think it's a great idea to see what, how this can help us. Yeah, yeah.
So an easy first step, right?
Yeah.
Should make.
So, okay, so let's say that NISBA has a service that can help us maybe perform the responsibilities related to collecting some data. Then what does the community action team want to do? It was formed 3 years ago when Diana was here.
Yeah, Brian.
I still don't understand the scope of it.
The intent, among other things, one of the original intents was for the team to go out by themselves, with administration, teachers or otherwise, and get the feel of the community, the concerns of the community. So I would think, if just what we're talking about now, let's say NISBA says they're willing to help, the community action team would then find ways, could be, let's go to the coffee shop and say, hey, we're gonna be here for the next couple of hours, post people in, or push in and say, we're going to go and just ask people what they think. But the idea was to get the voice of the community in some way, and then report back on specific subjects, or sometimes just, hey, how you feeling? What are you thinking about the school right now? Oh, I don't have any kids in it. Well, that's fine, but what do you think? Well, whatever they say, and try to get the voice of the community. That was the original intent. COVID happened right after we formed it.
Right.
It got really silly, weird, whatever. But that was the intent. The intent was try to get the voice of the community in any way that we could. So I think there would be a place in this case for that.
So what do you do with it as a board of education? Solicit random feedback, how you can, right? You know, what your thoughts are on the school district. Then what?
Tell them to talk to their building principal.
Well, that's why I think, wow.
Do you think so that like just having an option to gather information and to have awareness of it, I guess, that's valuable even if you don't do anything with it immediately. That's valuable to have like your temperature taken and stuff.
If
I don't-
that's what, if it's a temperature check, then what I think in rollout is that we have to be really clear about what it is, because I believe that people will assume. It is actually,
Yeah.
okay,
I think the intent was, because you're right, data unused is one of the biggest places, and then people get upset. The intent was to it was temperature check, but the idea was to say, listen, we've talked to 50 people in the last month, and a lot of things come up, and we told them we can't get back on everything, but overwhelming school safety was the thing that was everybody's top of mind. And so, hey, can we have a meeting at one of our next meetings? Can we have a discussion on school safety? And it seems to be an important thing in the community. That was the idea, that as a community action team, you say, listen, we heard you. We'll do our best to continue to listen. And from time to time at board meetings, we're gonna bring some of your concerns and try to, understand where we stand on these things. That was the hope. You're right. Sally Smith comes up and has her issue, and she's the only one who's got that issue. It's tough because the loop back to Sally Smith might be like, listen, we heard you, but right now we've got a huge focus on something else, and we'll get back to it. That closed loop is not easy.
from where I stand, right, one of the things that I really try to do is be responsive in the form of superintendent goals, right? If we collectively agree, these are my goals, what's hard is that if this all of a sudden becomes an issue, now I have to divert attention to this, taking me away from what we committed to as a district. Does that make sense when I say it like that? I'm not saying there's going to be things we don't have to do, it's common everyday practice.
You're right.
But if we are soliciting abstract ideas, right? People will assume that that needs to be actionable. And as a result, it will tax what's happening internally. And so I want to be really methodical about how we sort of solicit the voice of our community. And I think we can do that by saying, this is our topic. Right?
I agree.
How do you feel about cell phones, for example?
right? That kind of thing. So that's, open discussion, right? That's why I think that we should really get crystal clear about what this committee is going to do.
I think that's a really good point, and I think it, and then just clarify. Something that we're looking to see if we're gonna put something that we're gonna try to enforce, and then they're boundaries around the process.
All right, so
A great way to think about it, like with using the word enforce, right, from a board perspective, you get to enforce Scott Ryan. Right?
Yeah.
That's the hardest part about it. So when you bring up these types of issues, these are huge issues for me because, again, I have 7 bosses, right?
Yeah.
So that's gonna become an agenda for me. All of a sudden, that's gonna trickle down to Eric Cunningham, who's gonna say, how the hell is this now? You said we were focused on attendance.
Right.
Now we're doing this, right? Follow me?
Right.
So we gotta keep our eye on the prize, I guess is my view. Sorry, Eric.
Eric, you're gonna have to bring out the teachers.
yeah, all right, let's keep plugging. So I think the action item, we'll use the community action team that we've committee that we've identified to be the sounding board as we move forward with determining how we're gonna initiate the research and understanding of the cell phone policy. So we'll reach out to NISBA, we'll find out if they have any resources, and then we'll go to that group and kind of start initiate the direction that we take.
So that I'm clear, who's reaching out?
Right, that's my question.
Well, why don't you and I, and we'll keep, you and Brian and I will talk about it, because we already have a reach out to NISBA about policy practice topics too, so we can talk to Mark about that as well. So let's do that together. So,
Okay, as final wrap up, we have a subcommittee, community action team meeting tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock.
Oh, was it scheduled?
Yes.
I can't make it.
So what we'll do is we'll postpone until we hear back from this. Agreed?
Good, all right.
Thank you.
Was this, when was that? Oh, there it is.
Any other discussion?
Was it
Hearing
show
none.
up on web?
Hearing none, let's move on to item number 4, subcommittee updates. Are there any other subcommittee updates that we need to hear tonight?
Really got an overview of all our subcommittee participation and programs.
Doesn't want to hear capital project, no.
We watched, we got the audit presentation tonight, that was audit and finance, and then policy, we talked about the presentation we got there, and hopefully we get that next week.
Well, I think it's also important in the policy committee, like, to talk about that. The lawyers, which I can't think of their name right now, Ferrara, Fiorenza, have a service where they can review our current policy manual and to, like, what they're gonna do is they're gonna look through every single policy and then let us know which ones are required, which ones we don't have that are required. And then the ones that we do have that might not be good to have and therefore kind of just reduce, the liability and, loss in.
We're about 200 policies over average, right? Yeah. That's conservative. It has, and their job's gonna be a lot easier thanks to the efforts last year.
So what I asked him to do was go through the list of mandatory board policies, 53. Of those mandatory policies, what we currently have, what that's, so I sent that already for our president to review. We're about 28, I think, short of the mandatory, right? And we're about 300 and some heavy of the other. And I'm not kidding you, there are things in there that, again, you guys are being held accountable to. Someone could walk through that door to say, it says 1980, right? This is the following policy. So, I think, we're gonna get a recommendation that says we can purge a great deal of what we have.
Not on the phone.
Okay.
Should I be thinking about capital projects that I know nothing about?
All right, capital project, we have we haven't had a few meetings in a little while, because there's just things going on with that. Brian, do you have like comment at all about that? Or?
I mean, the reason we haven't had a meeting is they're really busy getting all our documents in order and through the SCD process, which SCD is short staffed. So right now, there's just been a lot of back and forth between King and SCD. Really not much to meet. Design phase for phase 1 is over. They just got to get their submissions. We could say we're hands off until you guys get us through that.
We have 7 contractors in house who've been processed for the room the other day. So they heard the scope, they toured facilities that need new roofs. So that's phase 1. Doing some HVAC stuff. So our boiler is expansion tanks that we're waiting on, right? Expansion tank installation. It's starting to get a little cool outside, so Eric, once again, hang on, right? We'll do one over there eventually, but we're close. We're close to being able to be 100% operational with a brand new boilers. Anybody wants to see them, I'll show you. It's pretty impressive, actually. Great boilers come.
Is it something you have to find? Okay.
You walk in the door.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the next agenda item, please. Number 5, consent items. I will entertain a motion to approve all the consent items. I'll move it. Moved by Clyde. Second,
Second.
who seconded it?
Kieran.
Kieran, second. Is there discussion or
Yeah.
question?
So the anonymous donation in the amount of 20,000, that goes into the general fund. Right, it's always my fear that we're gonna,
Not necessarily, sometimes staying, we'll put in a special aid.
like, snack them, or,
That's special appointments.
okay, so what, did this come on a money order, or?
There's a stipulation.
Donors can't stipulate.
Well, right, you know, that, I want to make sure that they know that.
This is more of a grant.
No, it was a grant.
About,
So this one was for Steve. Equipment.
okay, yep, pretty sure.
Improving our Steve.
Okay, that's all I needed to know, that it wasn't like churches and stuff.
Okay, any other questions or discussions? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried. Action items. Board policy approval. It is recommended that the Board of Education, let's see. Yeah, that's the only person, excuse me. Board of Education approved the attached board policy for first reading. A203.4 terms and conditions of employment, managerial, confidential, and non-represented employees. Do I have a motion? Moved by Brian Reed, second by Roz Durensis. Any discussion or questions?
Policy subcommittee will see that again, possible revisions coming.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried. Approval of the interlocal purchasing system resolution tips. It's recommended the Board of Education approve the tips resolution that's attached. Do I have a motion? Moved by Roz, second by Brian Reed. Any discussion or questions? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried. Approval of the 2021-2022 external audit reports. It's recommended the Board of Education of the Norwich City School District approve the attached 2021-22 external audit reports, and they're listed there. Do I have a motion? Moved by Clyde, second by Deb. Any questions or comments or discussion? Excuse me. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So carried. Confirmation of and authorization of revised tax warrant. It's recommended that the Board of Education adopt the attached 22-23 revised tax warrant resolution, confirming the tax roll and authorizing issuance for the warrant for the 22-23 school year. And the spreadsheet was attached. Do I have a motion? Moved by Brian Reed, second
Second.
by Kieran. Any discussion or questions?
To comment on that. City and county updated to assess values, that's why they changed. Nothing is.
Pam needs everyone's signature, and you probably are short a couple, right? Just Brian. Yeah, so make sure you hit her up before you leave. So, or before she leaves. All right, I have 2 items that are not on. Oh, excuse me. Thank you. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So carried. Thank you, Brian. Yeah. one of the things that we did not do last month was we are members of the Shenango County School Board Association. And we do not have an official representative. At our reorg meeting, we should identify that person. Deb Phelps has agreed to be our representative, so we have to make it official. So I'll entertain a nomination, motion to nominate Deb Phelps as our representative to CCSBA. So that was nominated by Roz. Any second?
All second.
Second by Brian Reed. Any discussion or questions?
Thanks. Deb.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So carried. So another thing that I've discovered it as a NISBA organization member, we're now members. We are, as a school district, have a vote or should have a delegate to vote in NISBA organizational matters, so fair policy and so forth. So we need to identify in meeting minutes who our delegate for NISBA would be. So I will gladly do it as president, or if someone else has an interest in doing it.
I'll give that Chris be our representative.
I second.
All right, so we have a motion to make me the NISBA voting delegate.
My third.
Moved by Clyde, second by Roz. Any questions or discussion? All those in favor? Aye. So carried. I'll entertain a motion to move the personnel recommendations.
Motion.
Moved by Brian Burton, second
Second.
by Brian Reed. Any discussion?
Yes. A quick thing, so we get like 10 million versions of the personnel recommendations, and I know in the past, changes were highlighted in yellow, because I think the latest version, I was like, what's different? So can we go back to that? Okay,
No, I will make sure that.
okay. So that's helpful when we see all these different versions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So carried. Public comment.
Just to sign in, there, no comment. Great. Once you put your name on that sheet, you do.
You're completely. 5-minute dissertation. All right, so at at this time, we're gonna go into executive session. However, we will not have it. There will now be no action. So we're going into executive session to talk about personnel matters. So do I have a motion to enter executive session?
So
Moved by Brian Reed, second by Clyde. Any discussion? Oh, you. Is everyone all right with Jess and Brian being in executive session?
Service as well as directed teaching.
Yes. Sure. Is everyone in favor of that as well? All right, all of those in favor? Aye. So carried. Sorry.